Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the first Knockout Opiate Abuse Day Learning Series webinar of the year. This webinar series is designed for education and awareness of the opioid crisis, and the series is sponsored by the Partnership for a Drug for New Jersey, NJ Cares, and the New Jersey Office of the Attorney General. And today's webinar is being held in collaboration with the Opiate Education Foundation of America. I thank you for joining us for this learning series webinar, a conversation with Sam Quinones. So welcome, Sam. Sam is a nationally recognized expert on the opioid crisis and the author of the book, Dreamland, A True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic. And Dreamland chronicles the roots of America's epidemic of opiate addiction, the nation's deadliest drug scourge in its history. And the story is also an attempt to show how Americans' desire to avoid pain, together with destruction of community, made this country especially vulnerable to addiction of opiates and the most isolating and devastating class of drugs that we know of. I know so many of you, like me, have read Sam's book, Dreamland, and we're engrossed by the history, connections, and detail provided. And we're so looking forward to today's discussion. We're so pleased to have our featured speaker with us today. So without anything further, it is my pleasure to welcome Sam Quinones. Sam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Angela. It's great to be here with you all. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I'm sure y'all are busy. And it's a great pleasure. I hope everything is good out there in New Jersey. Thanks to the partnership for their interest in your interest in my work. Very nice of you all. So today I was going to talk for about maybe 25, 30 minutes, talk a little bit about where I see things stand now, particularly the kind of stuff that I've been writing about in my latest book, called The Least of Us, True Tales from America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth, because I think that a whole lot has changed, top to bottom, really. I hate to say it, but I think it's true. Since the Dreamland book came out. It's interesting. And then after that, what I would really like to do is hear lots of questions, comments. I think that's very helpful. We can go as long as y'all want. I'm very interested in hearing from all over the country on these topics. And so feel free to just chime in. And Angela will kind of handle that, I think. Thank you again for that, Angela.
Just to confirm before you kick off, please, any questions you have, please put into the chat. We do have the questions that were submitted through registration, but we'll also be monitoring the chat to provide those questions to Sam.
Great. Yeah, wonderful. So just as a matter of to begin, I want to say that when I finished Dreamland, about a year after I finished it, maybe a year and a half, the publisher comes to me and goes, you need to write another book about this topic. And I was, what can I say? I was exhausted. You know what I mean? I was just out of it. My little brain has all it could do to keep all that stuff in Dreamland focused in an orderly way. And I knew, though, the story that I had written was a very big one. I thought it was about, initially, when I started, I thought it was about drug companies and heroin traffickers out of Mexico. Little boxes, very easily, very neat. And as I got into it, I found that actually it was much bigger than that. I was really struck by that, I have to say. It happened on the road to writing the book. I did not know this when I started. And it involved, for example, I believe, if you've read the book, the real fundamental thing was that we had done so much in this country to destroy community, to ignore those who kind of were at the lower end. But also, you found this kind of thing going on in wealthier and in suburbs and wealthier neighborhoods and all. It was not an economic story, I found at the end. It was really about isolation and our destruction of community. Also about how we as Americans really wanted easy, convenient, quick solutions, big, sexy solutions, one size fits all solutions, all their problems, right? And I understood that. But when my publisher first proposed this, I didn't know what I would write. And also, I have to say this. I had been I'm still consider myself really a crime reporter. That's my job, basically. I really thought, was thinking old school, honestly. I said, what could be worse than heroin? What comes after heroin, right? I mean, literally, that's how I thought. Just because you write a book doesn't mean you can predict the future, okay? A lesson to us all. And so what happened was, as Dreamland came out, to my great surprise and my family's great surprise, I began getting invitations to go speak. Now, this was surprising to us because when I was writing Dreamland, I felt very much alone. There was this enormous story. I knew it was coast to coast. I knew it was a big deal and nobody wanted to talk about it. Very few media were covering it. Families, especially of addicted folks, had really retreated and didn't want to talk. They were very ashamed and mortified. The obituaries were fabrications. And so as I was writing the book and out there in America, wandering around going, this is an amazing story. It's everywhere. It's huge. I also was struck by the fact that nobody wanted to talk about it. It was very much like the early days of the AIDS epidemic when nobody wanted to acknowledge that their son had died of AIDS, say. And then as I got out there, I began doing these speeches. I began going to all these different places. I was in New Jersey 3 or 4 times, in fact, that I began to see. It was a stunning thing to watch people come out of the shadows, and it began to happen very quickly after the book comes out. I would say within a year, I was giving speeches, and all of a sudden, every county I go to, there would be like a new task force, but it didn't just include law enforcement. It was also clergy and chamber of commerce and college presidents and recovering addicts and doctors, et cetera, et cetera. It was a remarkable thing to watch this thing take place. And I lived it. I lived it before when nobody wanted to talk about it. And I lived it as I began to see this new move. But along the way, I began to see what comes after heroin. And of course, we all know that that's fentanyl. The story of how that happened, I tell in this book, but suffice to say that fentanyl is part of a larger story, really, of the trafficking world down in Mexico, moving from plant-based drugs, which we all know, heroin, marijuana, cocaine to some degree, although that's made really in the Andes, in Colombia and that kind of place, to synthetic drugs. We are now fully in the era of synthetic drugs, seems to me. That is the story nationwide, not just in New Jersey, not just in LA, not just in Ohio, but really nationwide. And it was a remarkable change. And it really takes place because this is what is happening in the trafficking world. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with customer demand. It has more to do with the fact that producing synthetic drugs is in every single way more in the interest and the profit of the drug traffickers. Primarily in Mexico. If you make let me say that the trafficking world down there was founded on agriculture. Most of the early pioneers were all farmers or ranchers or what have you. And now 2 generations later, generation and a half later, all their children, grandchildren or what have you, their legacy is switching now to synthetic drugs. Why? Well, think of all the ways in which it's much better if you're a trafficker to produce a chemically based drugs in a lab. You don't need land, right? You don't need sunshine. You don't depend on the rainfall. You don't need farmers. You can collapse that supply chain significantly. All kinds of people are cut out of it. Now, fewer people means less risk, fewer people to pay, et cetera, all that kind of stuff, right? And what you do need, and this is crucial, what you do need are shipping ports, because through shipping ports, you can get access to the world's chemical markets. China, chemicals made in China, but India, Chile, Czech Republic. I mean, you name it. It's just like the whole world. And some of this stuff is made in Mexico, but the Mexican traffickers have essential control over 2 ports on the western side of Mexico. About, if you look at a map, it's about a day and a half, 2 days drive south of Arizona. And they have learned this over a period of years. They learned it first with methamphetamine in the 90s. I understand the methamphetamine is not the big issue in your area that it is in other parts of the country. So I'm really just going to speak about fentanyl today. If you have questions about methamphetamine, feel free to add them to the chat room. But the story is really the same for both. And that is, they discover that this is the best, that this is like in the most profitable way to make drugs, not grow them anymore. And they begin to do that. Now, this is the trafficking world down in Mexico figured this out due to an underground chemist in 2006 who clued them in on this. He will later went to prison. It's a story I tell in the first part of the Least of Us. But they never forgot that there was a synthetic way of making a heroin substitute. Essentially, they didn't really know what it was before he came along, this chemist. So they kind of forget about it because he goes to prison. They don't have anybody to make it for them. And then meanwhile, Chinese chemical companies begin to figure out, hey, this stuff can be sold on the internet, on the dark web too. And you began to see the first kinds of fentanyl that come over are really from China, mailed through the mail, in pound boxes or kilo, but not more than that. Really small quantities, generally speaking. And it comes to people who are lower level dealers are the ones buying it. And they're the ones who are putting it into heroin first. And what you begin to see then early on in that story is the clusters of overdoses. And you may remember, or maybe not, but there were these significant dozens of overdoses in a weekend in a certain area of Cincinnati or Huntington, West Virginia. All this began to hit the areas that were most intensely damaged by the opioid epidemic, where pill addiction was really a long-term thing, and now people had switched to heroin. And local dealers saw this as a way of just like supplanting the heroin that they had to get from the Mexican drug traffickers. But the Mexicans also began buying a lot of that fentanyl that was coming out of China. The overdoses were in clusters because the folks at the bottom saw that fentanyl was this enormously profitable thing, very potent, very easy to smuggle. Small amounts would get you high. A little bit more. The problem was a little bit more than that would kill you. And that's what began to happen almost from the beginning, largely because the guys at the bottom who were buying this stuff through the mails didn't have a clue what they were doing. It's very difficult to mix this stuff properly, even under pharmaceutical conditions, and they definitely are not pharmaceutical chemists. And so part of that, the reason for that, and I talk about it in The Least of Us, is that there was this myth circulating around that time that the best way to mix your fentanyl with other powders that don't do anything, they're just bulky kind of things, because you can't sell fentanyl. In the amount of fentanyl it takes to get you high is like 3 or 4 grains of salt. It's like that. A few more will kill you, but that will get you high. So you can't really, as a dealer, cannot sell 3 or 4 grains. So you have to mix it with other powders, and that's what began to happen. The problem is they're very bad at it. And the other problem was that there was this feeling in the drug world that the best way to do that was using a magic bullet blender. Now, I own a magic bullet blender. It's magnificent for making smoothies and salsa and all that stuff, but it's really bad for mixing fentanyl. And they began, yet that was the myth. The problem is that fentanyl, a magic bullet blender is a blade, and you can mix liquids with a blade. You can't mix powders. So anyway, this is what we began to see first. People at the lower end not knowing what the hell they were doing and mixing it badly, and then just clusters of very scary clusters of overdoses. And of course, that continued, and people began to die in much greater numbers as fentanyl took hold as the trafficking world's substitute for heroin, right? It then evolved, and by 2017, the Mexican trafficking world had figured out how to make fentanyl. Now, took it 3 or 4 years, but pretty soon, by then, it was all pretty much a lot of folks down there knew how to make this. When that began, they were still they would send up kilos or powder form of fentanyl, but they happened on the idea, I'm not sure who, but it became quite the rage down there, excuse me, to package heroin in as counterfeit pills, branded prescription pills that we know in the United States. So they began the first counterfeit pills that contain only fentanyl now. They don't contain anything else. Begin to show up in 2017. First seizures were like 10,000 pills, 12,000, 30,000. Very quickly, though, knowledge spreads down in Mexico and it just explodes. And pretty soon you see the Los Angeles area, for example, 2020, seizing 1.2 million pills. Then a couple of months ago in November in Scottsdale, Arizona, one house, they seized 1.7 million pills. I mean, this thing has just taken off because it makes sense. It makes sense from a trafficker's point of view. Always remember that this is what the traffickers find most in their interest. You send up a pill, it doesn't disintegrate. Americans love pills. There's all these people who are still addicted, they think, to pills. And of course, fentanyl is cheap. It's dirt cheap. You can make it very easily and very quickly. Those people are going to, those folks who think they're using Xanax or Percocet are going to be addicted to those pills. At the same time, at the lower levels of our drug dealing ecosystem, you might call it, you find people seeing dealers seeing that there's so much of this fentanyl coming over that they now begin to add it to any drug that's around, almost like we add salt to food, as naturally as that. That's what they begin to do. First, they add it to heroin. But after a while, they begin to add it to other drugs. And one principal one is cocaine. Cocaine comes up from the Andes. As I said, you get it, 4 or 5 different hands, changes hands 4 or 5 different times. It gets diluted, and fentanyl proved to be one way in which you could boost the drug. It's like this special dust, special sauce. You can just boost your cocaine. Also with methamphetamine to some very, very rare degree, I think, to marijuana, but I don't think that's really been the issue that the other drugs are. Now, all of this that I just described began to contribute to the overdose death toll that we now have seen reach record heights. But for 2018, 19, 20, you're beginning to see this take place. People ask me frequently, and it's an excellent question, why would drug dealers add a drug like fentanyl, which could kill people very easily, to a drug like the cocaine? For a good example is cocaine. And because you would think why they would be it would be a risk in killing off their customers, right? And yes, that's true, they do. However, there's lots of good business reasons if you're a dealer for doing that. Number one, if you add your cocaine is a drug that people generally buy every once in a while. It's like a weekly, maybe every 2 or 3 days, all of that. Well, if you add fentanyl to your cocaine, then pretty soon what you're going to get is a customer who goes from being an occasional user to an opioid addict. An opioid addict has to use every single day. So it's a market enhancement tool. Just think of it that way. Get more customers. They buy more often. It makes sense if you're a local drug dealer. Also, once people start getting addicted to fentanyl, and in many parts of the country, that's where we are now. Nobody's under any illusions that what they're buying is something else, I think. And well, not nobody, but a lot of people are not. The folks, in fact, they're looking for fentanyl because they're now addicted to fentanyl. Once you have people addicted to fentanyl, then a person who dies is not necessarily a warning to your customers. It's an advertisement. Say, hey, I'm selling this really powerful dope. Come get it. And that is not new to fentanyl. That's been going on in the heroin world for a long, long time. The other thing is, once you have one person adding in the like the Wild West kind of competitive market that is most drug dealing regions, you get, once people are using it and addicted to fentanyl, then if you don't, as a dealer, if you don't put fentanyl into your product, you very quickly will not have any customers left. So there's a lot of competitive reasons, economic reasons why you would do that, even though you would risk killing off some of your customers. I would say about fentanyl too, that it has really changed everything about drug trafficking and drug use and drug. It changed who can be the kingpin. Almost anybody. It's so prevalent now. You can get it anywhere. No longer did you have to rise in some kind of shady drug world. Now you can to get that kind of supply, you can get it very easily. You can find it very easily. The fentanyl has answered the big issue facing that always faced drug dealers, which was, where do I get my supply? Well, now the supply is so prevalent in so many areas that it's not difficult. Now the question is, where do I sell all that I can get? Well, is when it comes to these pills, and during a time of COVID, you began to see where people are indoors, a lot of people on their phones. They began to sell a lot of those pills online, on smartphone apps, on Snapchat and Instagram. I want to talk to parents a little bit about this. This is very, very important. A lot of parents are just not aware of this taking place, it seems to me. Maybe it's changing a little bit, but I have to say, parents, when you're out there, remember the new street corner. Hate to put it this way, but I think it's really true. The new street corner, drug dealing street corner in America today is Snapchat. It's Instagram. It's TikTok. Got to be very careful who's on Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok with your children. So many kids have died buying stuff that they're feeling a little depressed because they're online all day long. They're in COVID. They can't go to school, don't see their friends. And in most areas, the dealers will deliver to their homes because they know kids can't leave. So you see lots of kids, 15, 16, 18. These kids have very little experience with drugs. So they're getting fentanyl, which will just kill them right off. It's a terrible, terrible thing that's going on all across this country. And I think parents need to understand this and need to actually put pressure on these apps, get organized, talk to your schools, talk to your churches, et cetera, all these different places where people come together. This needs to be far more widely understood. The people selling that stuff are almost the same age as those who are buying it. I mean, it's generally the lowest form of drug dealing. It's the smallest quantities, but the effect, because it's so common now, and because the supply, it's all about supply now. The supply is so tremendous that you can get these pills online pretty much in any part of the country. Although I have to say, I'm not sure about New Jersey, but it does seem to me that this is now the thing, the way to sell, and it's all over the other parts of the country. I would say that fentanyl has changed, how often people buy too. Fentanyl I should say this, fentanyl is a magnificent drug when used medically. I've had fentanyl. Many of you probably had fentanyl as well. When you're in surgery, it's revolutionized surgery. I had a heart attack 5 years ago. They gave me fentanyl. It was very, very happy that they did. It's a revolutionary drug because it takes you into anesthesia and out of it very quickly. Therefore, you don't get all doped up. You're not left with kind of like a foggy mind for a couple hours after surgery. But that same thing makes it even more dangerous in the drug world, because as a drug addict, you need to use it more often because you're in and out of it more quickly. And that means every use now of almost any drug on the street is kind of like a game of Russian roulette. The days of recreational drug use, I'm afraid to say, are over. There's no recreation. It's just all a big game of Russian roulette. And this goes for pills that may look exactly like a prescription pain pill. In fact, right now, today, if you are using anything that did not come from a pharmaceutical bottle that you yourself bought from a pharmacy, you're taking an enormous risk. The other thing is this, when I was a kid, we would laugh at all those movies about drugs, oh, drugs are driving you crazy and you drop dead and all, we'd laugh and it was funny. Here's the thing, those myths, they were myths back then, 70s, 80s, 70s, my case. Those myths have all become reality. You can die from one hit of cocaine. People do it all the time. Michael K. Williams, a wonderful, wonderful, talented actor, played Omar on The Wire, man. That guy was such a great actor. He had a cocaine problem. He died of fentanyl. He didn't die of cocaine. So this is happening all over the country. All those myths have become reality. There's no such thing as recreational drug use anymore in America. Those days are long, long gone. And it's because of the synthetic nature of these drugs. The synthetic nature mean that they can make them all year round. There's no seasons anymore when it comes to drugs. If you can get the chemicals which are coming into Mexico through those ports in simply staggering quantities, you can make these drugs all year round. The interesting thing is, too, we call the traffickers down in Mexico. This is why this is happening. To explain a little bit about why this is happening. Normally, you think of a cartel economically. A cartel is a group that comes together to restrict supply to force price up. That's what OPEC was in the 70s, right? With regard to oil. These groups, we call them cartels, but they're really not cartels. They are loose confederations, sometimes closer, but there's very little control when it comes to production. In fact, the trafficking groups down there make their money in a way that it creates this problem that we're seeing in the United States. A trafficking group will have control of a few regions, or maybe within that you have one guy who's like control of this little fiefdom over here, another guy over there, little plazas, they call them, little spots. The folks down there, generally speaking, who are in charge of stuff or in higher ups and parts of these fiefdoms, make their money several ways, but I'll mention two. One is they sell permission to producers to make meth or fentanyl in their age. You pay a fee, and you can make your fentanyl or your methamphetamine in my little plaza, in my little region. So they're making money based on how many people actually pay them to produce. So they want people to produce. On top of that, they make their money selling chemicals to those producers for methamphetamine and for fentanyl. It's very much like what they say about the gold rush. The people who made their money during the gold rush were the ones selling the shovels. I think in large part, the people who are making their money here are the ones, everyone's making money. Pretty sure on that. But the ones who are making the real money are the ones who are selling the permissions and the chemicals, which, as I say, is crucial in all this, is that we've got this stuff coming in just unbelievable, unregulated, unmonitored quantities into Mexico. No real attempt to quash that. I would say that this also changes a lot about our approach to drug treatment and drug addiction. Because these drugs, meth and fentanyl, but I'll just focus again on fentanyl. Again, if you have questions about meth, feel free. Let me ask. We used to have this idea that people need to be ready for treatment, right? That you'll come to a moment when you'll get the wonderful concept of the gift of desperation. You will be so ground down and worn out and beaten up that you will have the gift of desperation and you will seek out treatment. The problem with fentanyl is that does not happen. Okay. Fentanyl will kill people. There is no such thing as a long-term street user of fentanyl. Does not exist. You either get into treatment quick or you die. I talked to a federal drug court judge not long ago. Drug courts, I'll get to in a minute. I think they're crucial in all this. But I talked to him, and I was asking him, "Gee, who are you seeing? Who's your clientele?" Kind of, He goes, "Oh, we're just seeing meth users now." I said, "Well, what happened? What about fentanyl?" He said, they all die. They don't stay alive long enough to stay in, to get wrapped up in a drug court program. It just doesn't happen. It's a very, very scary thing. There is no developing a readiness on the street. Fentanyl will kill you before that. So we need to find ways of really taking people off the street. And we have seen this now in the latest statistics. The latest statistics on drug overdoses are clear. And this is a big part of fentanyl's, the lion's share of that. And I think one of the great tragedies of COVID, among the many tragedies of that pandemic, is that it came around just as the trafficking world had covered the entire country with these two synthetic drugs. Right? And at the same time, we began to decriminalize things like sale of fentanyl and the use of fentanyl. Now, hear me out on this, because I know that this is an issue that a lot of people take very seriously, and it's a sensitive one. I do believe that we now need to be in the business of pushing and cajoling and forcing people into treatment, getting them off the street. It is not a compassionate thing to say, well, you come by the treatment center when you're ready. That person will be dead before that ever happens, okay? I believe that part of the problem with COVID was it happened just as we were beginning to experiment with ideas of decriminalizing certain drugs, meaning that if you sold small amounts of fentanyl on the street, for example, you would get maybe a misdemeanor, or you wouldn't even be arrested at all. A lot of the jails, people were coming out, all of that kind of stuff. It was a perfect storm to form catastrophe that we are seeing now. The problem is with fentanyl, as I said, you will not live if you are using fentanyl on the street regularly. At the same time, fentanyl it's the kind of drug that where you have to use it, as I said, so often that you will always be at risk. There's no such thing as a good, consistent mix of fentanyl. That's why people die. I believe that selling fentanyl is really about the same thing as firing a gun into a crowd. And to me, that is because when you sell fentanyl, that you are almost guaranteed to do enormous harm, and you're very likely to kill somebody. I believe, therefore, that we need to do two things that there are many things, but I'll just talk about two of them because we don't have a whole lot of time. And that is that, first of all, and I part of this book it describes this. I talk about we need to rethink how we do jail. Jail has been a disaster. Now, I would say a lot of folks, too many recovered addicts for me to count, and certainly for me to ignore, have told me the best thing that ever happened to them was when they were arrested. That's when their sobriety began. That's when their recovery began. But too often, jail does not make proper use of all the moments in which people come in, detox, and all of a sudden view their lives with clarity. So what we need to do, I think, and this is one of the things I talked about in the least of us, is look to make a jail a starting point of recovery. And increasingly, particularly in areas that have been most hard hit by the opioid epidemic, counties are experimenting with new ways, rethinking jail as places of recovery. Extraordinarily important thing to do. Is it a panacea? Of course it is not. I'm just saying that this is the first step towards what I think is the long-term goal, which is attempting to forge a community-ready, a recovery-ready community, all these different ways we have of addressing how to make it easier for people to recover instead of putting obstacles in and jail frequently for a lot of people is just a big obstacle. It's a place where you vegetate, you don't do anything. You watch Judge Judy all day long, plan your next score, you get out, you go right to the dope dealer's house. We need jail to begin the place of recovery. We need a place to put people so they are not out on the street. We need also the leverage of law enforcement. A lot of people say, well, sounds like the drug war. The drug war, to the extent it failed not because we use law enforcement. It's because we only use law enforcement. It's the same thing we did with the pain pills. We decided, well, we're going to cure all Americans' pain with one kind of pill. We're talking about the central nervous system of the brain here. There's no chance that one thing is going to work. Law enforcement absolutely has to be part of the mix and is in various ways. That's not to say it's the only thing, though, and we have seen that does not work. So I think that all of this is calling us to rethink ideas that we thought were kind of settled. And I think that a jail is one. Drug court is absolutely another. We need a place where judge, prosecutor, probation officer, defense, and the client himself are all involved in figuring out ways of getting that person into recovery, dealing with that person when relapse. If you go to, one of the most amazing things about drug courts is if you go to drug courts, you will see this. The judge seems to know enormous amounts about that person standing in front of him. Knows where she's gotten, how many babies she has, who her baby daddy is, all that kind of, where she's living. It's a remarkable thing. And that is the future, I think, of a chunk of law enforcement and criminal justice in every county in America, because it's using the leverage, the threat. You're going to be sent to prison, but we don't want to send you there. What we really want to do is get you into treatment. And if you fail, we're going to be there to help you out. The problem is we have to do this kind of stuff because otherwise people out on the street will die. They are dying right before. It is not compassion. It's the most misguided idea to think that this is compassionate to leave people out until they're, quote unquote, ready. Finally, I just say this, that it seems to me that the pandemic and the epidemic are all kind of pointing to the same idea that I wanted to get across. The reason I call my book The Least of Us is that it seems to me to be that's what this is all calling on us to understand, that we're only as strong as the most vulnerable. We're only as strong as the least of us, right? We have turned our back. We have this enormous power within us. It's an absolutely most powerful thing we have. It's the reason why we survived, the Homo sapiens survived as a dominant species on the planet. And that is this intense need, not just desire, but need to be in community with other people. We saw this during the pandemic, how much we needed it when we lost it. The opioid epidemic was already teaching us that. We just didn't see it as vividly. And to me, this is the great overarching lessons where I gain the most hope, frankly, from all this dour and sinister scenario that I've just described, because it's showing us, look, for millennia and millennia, human beings have survived because they relied on each other. Right? And in America, in the United States, in the last 40 years, we have decided, well, those old rules don't apply to us. So now we are connected via technology, which is the most cumbersome kind of connectivity. It really doesn't lead to it should connect us. Instead, it's got us at each other's throats. We never would have survived as a species if our way of being in community way back when was Twitter. For God's sake, we'd have killed each other off long ago. You know what I mean? So this is, I think, the great message. And over, one of the things that I tried to do in my book, and one of the things I find really exhilarating, is to find the smallest stories of people, Americans, involved in the smallest way. Not trying to get those big magic answers that led to the opioid epidemic, one pill for all our pain problems. No, trying to find the small ways in which they can help repair community on their block or house of worship or school or a service club or whatever. To me, it's the local daily work, not by people who are not worried whether this is saving the world. It's not saving the world. It doesn't matter. It's the idea is find the way to help repair community in the small ways and stick with it. And get to know folks on your block. We have this I think this complete disease of isolation in our country that is profound. And that is at the root of all of this that I'm describing. There's a whole lot more that's there too. I just don't have time to talk about it all, but I want to make clear to you that the great stories to be told here are of people at the smallest level, not worried about whether they're the same religion or voted the same way as the people they're around. They're just kind of moving together, try to get past that stuff that Twitter and CNN and Fox tell us are so damn important. They're not. To me, this is the essence of what I was trying to get across in the book I just wrote. It grew out of all the work I did in Dreamland. It's this idea that we have done so much, to destroy community. In last 40 years, we decided all the old rules don't apply to us, just as we decided that we could use opioid painkillers and it would never addict us if we were pain patients. Nonsense. Complete, utter nonsense. So I believe, and finally, I'll just end on this, and I'm happy to talk to answer any questions y'all got. That is the great lesson. That we are better off in community, stronger in community, and necessary to be in community. We're as strong as the most vulnerable and the least of us. The least of us lie within us all. We are all the least of us. We all have the ability to be addicted to something. We all can be that addict eating from the trash. So with that, I just want to say that's kind of the ideas that I'm thinking about these days. There's a lot more that could be that I could talk about, and a lot more that other people are thinking about that I think is very valid. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have, and to the best of my ability, anyway.
Thanks so much, Sam. We have first of all, excellent presentation. Thank you for bringing us, back to your Dreamland days to current times. Sponsorship for this event is from New Jersey. We also have sponsorship from the Opiate Education Foundation of America. So we do have a lot of attendees from across the country. And I'll start with a comment just to give you a minute before we go into questions. But we had one of our attendees from Jefferson County, New York, talking about how their coalition was able to get harm reduction kits handed out, and that someone in the community can flag down even a police patrol car to get a kit. So when you talk about the least among us or what we can do, it looks like this coalition is kind of moving in that direction. And I can speak on behalf of New Jersey NJ Cares. They have a Handle with Care program to kind of put that dignity and that human face on someone who is suffering from the disease of addiction. And so seeing law enforcement be part of that and joining together with whether it be the faith-based community, exactly kind of what you're saying. Obviously, so much growth needs to happen and many things need to take place, but we are seeing those little things, it looks like, here in Jefferson County. And as I said, I can speak for some of those things that we're seeing in New Jersey. So glad to hear your perspective on that being a strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that law enforcement is in many ways, and I have to say it honestly, across this country, what I have seen is frequently law enforcement that's rethinking most clearly approaches to this. I've been struck by that. Jail is just one, drug court's another, but I mean, I think I've found that quite a bit, and I think it's just as crazy as saying we don't need law enforcement or we can do it with law enforcement only is just as crazy as saying we can solve all our pain with one kind of pill.
No, absolutely. And I'll just go right into the drug court question. I know, again, here in New Jersey, we've renamed drug courts to recovery courts, but I know around the country, they're called drug courts. Do you want to we had some questions on what your thoughts are.
Oh, no, as I said, I think they're absolutely essential, and they're essential for a few reasons. First of all, a typical client, she comes in, she's been in jail numerous times, she's been on the street, she's been brutalized, etc. One of the things I keep hearing when I go to drug courts from the clients is that for the first time, they feel part of a team. People are kind of forming around them, knowing, as I said, a lot about them. It's remarkable to me, it blows me away how much the judges seem to know about each person that stands in front of them. I mean, it'll be through, a typical drug court session, 10, 20 people, and the drug will know baby mamas and where your tattoo is and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it just really is a remarkable a knowledge. I think that is part of what I'm trying to say, which is that this is not your typical criminal court. Criminal courts have absolutely their role. But when it comes to addiction motivated infractions, crime, what have you, it really does help people to feel like the judge knows me, the prosecutor knows me, the probation guy knows me, even the court administrator knows me. All of these, and they all kind of have come together. To me, that is, again, it's getting to the community approach to dealing with someone's addiction. And it's also understanding what I was talking about at first, or at the end, which was to say that it's the small steps, right? Who is the greatest example of taking small steps to a longer term goal? Recovering addicts. Every day they show us kind of what we need to be doing in economic development or in municipal improvement or in municipal beautification. Take the small stuff, get some people together, work on painting the curbs. I mean, it's that kind of stuff as I'm talking about, where there's this feeling like, no one's in charge, no one cares. I'm not going to care either. All of a sudden you bring people together. You find out actually a lot of people do care. They just don't know how to channel it. When you give them these little options or opportunities, they do it. And the same is true with I think, a recovering addict. One day seen from above, you look down, you say, that guy didn't use dope for a day. That doesn't seem like a big thing. But down on the ground, it's everything. It's one day is everything. And that's why I say small steps, this stuff, working together on dealing with the smallest little problems, like unpainted curbs or, plants around downtown or picking up trash in a park. That kind of stuff leads to larger and larger agglomerations of people, and solutions come from that. They don't come when we're all like this. And drug court, I think, is the community, is an expression of the community coming together behind the addict, trying to say, don't worry about it. And she's feeling good. It's okay. And let's just move you forward. That kind of thing. It's a beautiful idea, I think.
Yeah. No, agree. Definitely. Can you take us back? How did you get involved in, where did your interest in the opiate crisis come from? And how and why did you decide to write Dreamland?
Well, I came from Mexico. I lived in Mexico for 10 years. And so I know Mexico pretty well, and I wrote 2 books about the country. If you could, on my first 2 books, people know me for these books behind me, but my first 2 books were all about Mexico. And so I come back to the United States, and then the drug war in 2004, a year later or so, the drug war down between among the cartels kicks off and gets very savage. And I'm put on a team of reporters. At first, what I wanted to write about was why there's more and more heroin coming into the country, meaning more and more people were using it. I could not for the life of me understand that, because I lived in Mexico when all this stuff with Purdue Pharma, OxyContin, pain is the 5th vital sign, et cetera, all that stuff was happening. I was oblivious. I didn't care about that at all. I was all about writing about immigration. I was writing about political change in Mexico. All that kind of stuff is fascinating. I was completely consumed by the country. And then I get here and I realize I'm doing the story about heroin. I could not explain why there would be any more demand for heroin. Why would that be, And then I kind of understood it. I'm going, oh, my story is real small. The much bigger story, like epic story, is of this change in pain management and this idea that you could prescribe opioid pain derived from the opium poppy in endless quantities to people who were pain patients, and they would not somehow get addicted. It was a bizarre moment in our culture, honestly. Growing out of, I think, the idea, I just want convenience. I want an easy answer. I don't like it when the doc tells me, hey, you don't need these pills. You need to work out. You need to lose weight. You need to stop drinking, and you need to stop smoking, and you need to eat a whole lot better food, make better choices, all that kind of. As Americans, as a culture, given the bombardment of mass media and advertisement and all that, we just didn't want to hear it. And so that's what led to it. But so I backed in. Most people come to this story from the pain pill idea. I came from the heroin idea, and then I realized there was this big story about pain pills that I had no idea about. But that's what kind of led to Dreamland. And then, of course, I was so into it by then that when fentanyl comes out and meth also, it's like so clearly this enormous story. And I have to say, were it not for a worldwide pandemic, this story would be the story that is really all over the country now, because it's an unprecedented thing how much this stuff has gone all over the country, and it's everywhere. It's just had to kind of be on the back burner given COVID.
No, you know what, Sam, absolutely. You know, one thing that I have found both in New Jersey and in my role nationally with the Opiate Education Foundation is that so many patients and parents of patients had indicated that, you know, they received these pain pills, or their children did, and they weren't aware of the potential for dependency and addiction with them. And here in New Jersey, we were able to get a law passed that requires that at the time an opiate is prescribed, a patient or the parents of the patient receives information, right, about the potential for dependency and addiction, and talking about small steps and what the community can do. We've seen that the New Jersey model go to 18 other states and other coalitions working to support that, just for that simple piece of education, right, at the time.
Yeah.
So it seems so common sense. It seems like so simple. All right, my doctor is going to tell me this, but it means that you're looking for the signs and symptoms of dependency and addiction. You know to secure those medicines. So everybody does have a role, and there is a step.
In 2009, before I got into this project, I had my appendix out, and they gave me 2 Vicodin in the hospital. I didn't know what they were. Again, I didn't know this stuff at all. And each day they gave me 2, and that was actually, in retrospect, that was fine. That was exactly what should happen. But then I'm leaving. They give me an enormous bottle, and they say a Vicodin, and say take as needed. And I'm like, okay. I thought it was like glorified Tylenol or something like that. And to me, that was kind of. And later on, years later, I began to think, God, there was no attempt to explain what that stuff was.
No, absolutely. So I just want to make a note. I know some people, we have many questions, and we're going to continue to go. Sam is willing to stay and answer questions. I know some people have to jump off at 1:00. We're going to put a poll up. If you could give us some feedback on today, just so we can help better plan our future events, we would appreciate that. But in the meantime, Sam, we have a question about your home state of California, or where you're living now, right? So what are your thoughts about NGOs running many of the drug programs in California? And do you feel that people should be left to do that, or it should be a government issue? Or what are your thoughts on the drug programs?
Well, I think that there's a wide variety of options that need to be available. I mean, I don't think it's a time to be saying, no, we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that. I do believe what's happened in the private sector is, and there's been investigative journalism about this as well, that there needs to be, there's an enormous amount of profit in this, and there's a lot of, therefore, incentives to cut corners or not do it halfway and that kind of thing. And I do believe that we need some oversight of NGOs or private sector companies who are doing this, doing treatment and so on. There are some that are very, very good, and then there are some that are not very good. And you see the reports about them occasionally. And I think that's damaging, first because they're really not doing much by the client, but also what they're doing is they're undermining the constituency, maybe political support for recovery that is been growing, that has been growing, because now so many people know people who are affected by this, families or what have you, and individual addicts and so on. And so I think that there's wide room for a lot of options.
Yeah.
I do believe that there needs to be some kind of oversight that's very aggressive, you know, and making sure that methadone can be a terrific thing for people. I've known people who have responded extraordinarily well to methadone, and I've known people who have not. There's all things, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. It needs to be there for some people. One way to not do a methadone clinic is to leave the perimeter unguarded, so that heroin dealers or drug dealers can come by and offer. That's happened a fair amount, and I've talked about it in Dreamland. You know, that's kind of thing is what we need to be very, very aware of. I think we need more of that stuff. We absolutely need to have more MET, medically assisted treatment. That kind of thing needs to be far more kind of part of the routine, I guess. Yeah. But it also needs to be accompanied by smart design of clinics. It needs to be accompanied by therapy. It needs to be accompanied by group mentoring, all that kind of stuff.
No, absolutely. So you talked a little bit in that response about the fact that everyone seems to know someone now who is impacted in one way or another. And another way that people are learning more about this issue, right, is through the media and through the entertainment industry, because we know obviously there's books out on this, such as your books, but also there's a lot of programming, right, that you can watch. So question came in, what is your opinion on shows like Dope Sick that many people in the general public have watched? Do you think that they're too over dramatized, or do you think it's good for people to see a dramatic version of the crisis and learn?
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with them. I have to say I haven't seen Dope Sick. I don't get Hulu, so I don't. But also, I'm going to tell you the truth too. When it comes to watching TV, I tend to complete escapist fantasy. I don't watch stuff about this topic because I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. Okay. I don't. Yeah. And for example, I have watched like 2 episodes of Narco on Netflix, you know. I know the story. I know the story of Rafael Caro Quintero, and I know all those guys, Chapo and Cochi Loco, and all those legendary narcos who are all, you know, dead now. I just kind of don't. I'm glad that it's working its way into shows like Chicago Fire and Bosch, and you see these, and that means it's understood as to be part of our country in a way that we all have to recognize, very, very important. But I can't bring I watched like 1 episode of Bosch that has to do with the and I just stopped. I was like, okay, fine. So pardon me, I just don't. I'm like, give me like, you know, Seinfeld.
Yeah, no. I'll be honest with you. I know many people in our field, many people who are on, and I know personally, I know they watch these shows and they love these shows.
Yeah, right now I'm
on the same page as you. Give me some Curb Your Enthusiasm and Seinfeld, and I'm much better off. But
right now, I am totally fixated on my San Francisco 49ers, my football team for the last 40 years, and I'm like, you know, I'm watching like the dumbest ESPN quote unquote debates that are just, you know, but why? It's because the rest of my professional life is caught up with stuff like this, and I just need something else, you know?
No, I hear you. Just because you mentioned sports, we had some questions about your thoughts on youth athletes here in New Jersey with our Blue Cross Blue Shield affiliate, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey. We're going to be launching a program speaking to high school athletes, but we got a lot of questions on and, you know, the role opiates play for them. Yeah. But we've gotten some questions on your thoughts on youth athletes, college athletes. Any thoughts on?
Oh, I think yes. I cannot tell you how many people I've met in the years between 2015 when the book comes out, but and March 2020 when COVID hit. I did something like just a remarkable number. I did like 265 speeches, okay, all over the country, and I cannot tell you how many stories of kids who died of a heroin back then it was kind of mostly heroin, that started with two ways. Athletic injuries of one kind, wrestling, football, baseball, soccer, sometimes hockey, or youth wisdom tooth extraction. It seemed to me that these were, if you controlled far more for those kinds of things, that we would have knocked down the number of kids dying in America by quite a number. I don't know what that number would be necessarily, but it was clearly a big issue. These both were big issues. Now, when it comes to athletics, part of the problem that doctors face is that they are getting 3 points of pressure when the kid wants to play. The parents, way too often, in my opinion, are insistent that the kid play. And of course, you have the coach too. And I wrote about this in Dreamland, a whole team, University of Akron, according to a couple of guys that I talked to and the parent of one guy, that entire team was basically disintegrated under because most of the starters got addicted to this stuff because they had injuries. And frequently there was this pressure to get them back into the lineup too soon. Time heals. And the problem is some of those shoulder injuries, knee injuries, that takes 6 to 8 weeks. Well, of course, that's most of the football season and nobody wants to do that. So you began to see what I found fascinating about Dreamland, is involved in this. And that is that there's a complex collection of pressures that led to it, and when it comes to sports and youth athletics, I would say, man, it seemed to me that there was all these, a doctor would say, well, I don't think so. The kid would say, no, I got to play, maybe a scholarship's involved here or something. And then the coach would say, you sure about that? The trainer, and there was, of course, I think we need to make pay far greater attention to the amount of pills that are around a locker room. It's just it was in the past anyway, not really sure now, but it seemed to me back then a devastating part of this epidemic.
No, absolutely. And you talked a little bit about dental procedures as well. And I know we have a colleague and a friend who we've worked with in Pennsylvania who's on with us today. And she speaks about that, having lost her son through, a dental procedure and the prescribing.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. And the question that came in was from her, and so I'm going to ask this. Hope you don't mind I'm calling you out, Rhonda. But why would dealers sell 100% fentanyl to those who are already addicted to heroin, like her son? And her son died in 2016. He thought he was buying heroin, died because it was 100%. Because
heroin is much more expensive, much more difficult to make, much more difficult to get to the United States. There's all kinds of reasons why, fentanyl began to show up, and it became like, oh, this is so much cheaper. It made total economic sense to do that. You want people to graduate to fentanyl because fentanyl is about the fifth the price. It was interesting. Somebody said, well, you're not right about that. In my area, a kilo of heroin and a kilo of fentanyl are of the same price. But that's leaving aside the idea that this kilo of fentanyl can be cut 25, 50 times sometimes. This kilo of heroin, you cut it 50 times, it's not even heroin anymore. It's lactose or whatever it is you're putting in there, right? And so it's just so much cheaper. And again, this is all from the perspective of the dealer trafficker world, not from the customer. The customer doesn't really matter. If the customer mattered, they'd still be doing heroin, right? Because heroin lasts longer, the high's a little bit better, but fentanyl it's almost like the understanding was, let's make this, they'll take it, whether they want it or not. And that's to the addicted mind, that's exactly what happened. Doesn't matter. Okay. So all of a sudden everyone's on Fenty as they call it, and I just think it has to do with the fact that it's just so much cheaper and easier to smuggle.
No, absolutely. We have a campaign, a public public health campaign that shows a sugar packet and how many doses from just sugar packet.
Crazy.
Fentanyl, yeah.
Crazy amounts. And then of course that doesn't even count the fentanyl analogs, which are even more potent. Acetyl fentanyl is like 15 times more potent. Carfentanil isn't even usable by human beings. It's really only legal for veterinarians and zoos to possess, because they have to deal with rhinoceroses and elephants and hippopotamuses. That's the proper patient for carfentanil is a hippopotamus or a rhinoceros, not a human being, for God's sakes.
So just sticking on the fentanyl topic, because we have two questions on that. One, I think you may have addressed already, but where the majority of fentanyl is coming from, and do you think that harm reduction efforts make an impact with fentanyl?
Fentanyl is now almost all entirely coming from Mexico. It used to come from China. The ingredients to make it still come from China to Mexico, but it's really being made in Mexico because now the traffickers, that one chemist in 2006 who clued him into it, he's long gone. Now it's a lot of people know how to make it. And they've used a lot of different chemists and so on. So it's coming out of Mexico almost entirely, although you can buy fentanyl, of course, on the dark web. You can buy fentanyl from, I don't know where, Bulgaria or wherever, who knows where these marketplaces are from. But the most of it now is coming right from Mexico. Harm reduction can be an excellent part of this. I do think the problem with harm reduction is, for example, naloxone. Naloxone ought to be like as common as like fire extinguishers. Like in a gas station or in a restaurant or what have you. You have every place has naloxone. I think we really need to understand that that's where we need to be. It's a lifesaver. There's no doubt about it. Part of it, though, is that people end up. I don't think any paramedic believes this, of course, but people end up thinking that with naloxone that's therefore we've done our job. No, naloxone needs to be the first step in towards then getting that person into treatment, because that person is going to be in a place where there is no naloxone eventually. I talked to this one guy, a cop in Ohio one day. He told me this woman on morning shift showed up. The morning shift guys treated her, and the police officers treated her, took her to the ER. They got her, they revived her, and then they kicked her loose. She wanted to leave, actually. Then by midday, the afternoon shift saw her again, take her to the ER. They revive her. She wants to leave again. There's nothing. And then on the midnight shift, she died, so she's dead. So to me, naloxone in schools, and again, another place where naloxone needs to be, I just think is wherever you have a fire extinguisher, it's probably a good idea to have naloxone. I mean, really, that kind of ubiquity kind of. But to me, it feels like we need to use those moments much more strongly than we've been doing, because the problem is when fentanyl is in the mix, it's a whole other level than heroin. Heroin is almost without any value in the United States right now. I suspect within a few years, we may not even see any heroin at all anywhere. People buy heroin, what they call heroin, it's all fentanyl. Yeah. So I think that kind of stuff is that we need to understand that because it is so deadly, there's no messing around. You don't have the time as an addict to develop the gift of desperation. When fentanyl's involved, you die before that ever happens, long before that ever happens. And people talk about this all the time. So I think we need to understand that we need harm reduction. Yes, needle exchange is a very important thing, but we need to understand that it has to be about getting people off the streets and into treatment in whatever form that takes.
So let me just ask this question, kind of flows into that. Your thoughts on safe injection sites in general, I think.
Safe injection sites, again, we need to say yes to everything. However, I want to make one thing very clear, and this was true with naloxone earlier. People would say, "Well, we revived all these people," and I'm thinking, yeah, that's true. You revived them once with each administration of naloxone. You revive them once. Well, with fentanyl, it takes a lot more than once. It takes more like 4 or 5 administrations of naloxone to actually revive someone. It depends, of course, how much fentanyl is in the system and all that. But But I would say that with safe injection sites, the measure of success cannot be how many people you have revived. I'm sure if you have someone there using a drug like fentanyl and you have naloxone, you are going to revive it. The bigger question is, what happens to that person? Not now, 2 weeks from now, when that person, because the problem with fentanyl is there's no surviving it. It seems to me you have to find ways of getting people off the street. It's not compassion to say, oh yeah, well, we're here whenever you need us. Yeah. Well, what about when that guy is with a buddy, he doesn't want to go, they shoot up, boom, he dies. To me, that the likelihood of death from fentanyl makes it so much more important to use things like naloxone, which is what they're using in safe injection sites, to get people into treatment. That should be the measure. How many people did you get into treatment from that safe injection site? Who are they? How are they doing? Let's not just judge on, well, we revived 30 people today. I'm sure you did. Because with fentanyl out there, everybody's overdosing. Or many people. In the mix, you can't get a good mix, right? So I'm sure you did. That is not the measurement. The measurement really needs to be long-term. How many of those people are still alive?
No, you know what, that, such an important point. We had in this series, we have discussed harm reduction and harm reduction efforts. And we have something else planned for this year to really further discuss that. What kind of resources need to be in a safe injection site? Where do we need to be getting that information out, or helping people get into treatment, and what is happening? I know there's been a lot of efforts on fentanyl test strips in the state, as well as efforts to get naloxone out, but looking a step further into the community.
Sure. No, I think all of that's very, 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 very important. We're going to find, I think, with fentanyl, the bill for naloxone is tremendous. It's very expensive to revive a person on fentanyl one time.
Yeah. So we had a lot of questions about Purdue Pharma and the Purdue bankruptcy deal and the appeal they're facing. Can you give us your thoughts on that, on Purdue? And
well, I put several chapters in this last book, kind of winding up the tale of the Sacklers and Purdue Pharma, at least as far as I want to write about it. One of the fascinating things is after people, this is again getting back to what I was saying earlier. As book comes out, Dreamland comes out, and all these, I travel around the country, I begin to see all these people coming out of the shadows. It's a very, very exciting thing to watch. I mean, really exciting, really fun. All these people kind of not being afraid anymore, going on Facebook, but also going to church and council meetings and all different places and being vocal about it. And what that does is that awakens the political world to this is a major issue. Now in Ohio and West Virginia, they knew that, but other parts of the country, they did not. And so you begin to see a lot of awakening on the part of public officials, elected officials, but also mid-level, government workers, et cetera, all this stuff. And what you begin to see then is all these different responses, more budget, more scientific studies. And by the way, I believe we cannot spend too much on neuroscience of addiction right now. It's just unbelievable what we can learn, and it can all inform policy and so on. But you began to see all this new response, and this would be 2017, 18, 19, right? And one of the responses was from attorneys general who decide, what am I going to do? I'm going to sue the companies. And what they also do is they bring to bear budget, investigation, and subpoena power. And so all of a sudden you're seeing all this information come out of these companies subpoenaed by this attorney general, that attorney general. And I was in my glory, man. I just would never, as a lowly freelance writer, just all alone, I don't have the resources to take on these companies and all that kind of stuff. But those subpoenas have extraordinary weight. And you began to see all these new stories about what was going on, particularly Purdue Pharma and the Sackler family. I would point you to the Tennessee Attorney General's complaint regarding Purdue Pharma and the Massachusetts Massachusetts Attorney General's complaint regarding the Sackler family. What becomes clear in that case, in the Sackler case, is that they became as addicted, it seemed to me, from reading the internal emails and memoranda and internal reports, they became as addicted to the money as any street addict was to OxyContin or heroin later. It's an amazing thing. They were making hundreds of millions of dollars from Purdue. Purdue was funneling to the family hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and still it wasn't enough. It was like, never will it be enough, you know?
Yeah.
Once it's too much, and too much, a million's not enough, or whatever they say in addiction recovery. All of that is really true when it comes to money too. And you saw that. Read the Massachusetts complaint. That's one of the overriding things that it seems to me it come out of all that. The other thing that they didn't do, they had money, they had no debt. They had hundreds of millions of dollars. In 2010, they received $889 million from Purdue Pharma in 1 year, right? They could have easily bought themselves a diversified pharmaceutical, buying this product and that drug and this, thing, and formed a real diversified pharmaceutical company. They never did. Like an opioid addict, they thought life could not exist without opioids. So they never diversified. They hired a CEO whose job supposedly was to diversify. They wouldn't let him do it. I mean, it was an amazing thing to read how addicted to the opioid revenue, really the OxyContin revenue, properly said, that this family was. And you can read it all in those things. It's an amazing thing to understand once you're getting into it. You go, wow, they were so upset because they would have the sales reps would have 2 weeks off or a week off for a holiday for Christmas. And then they would have the sales meeting, national sales meeting, which is a way for the sales force to get out and, go to Phoenix or Scottsdale or whatever. And that was just, and the Sackler family got very upset at that at one point. Why are we allowed? That means the doctors will go 3 weeks without seeing one of our sales reps, as if this was like the great national injustice tragedy, So anyway, I that's what I take away from it. I'm going to let the lawyers deal with what's going to happen with this. I don't pretend to know that kind of stuff, honestly, nor do I really follow it that closely. We'll see how it's all worked out. Maybe they'll be able to be sued, held criminally liable. Maybe not. I just don't. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I know. Especially when we talk about the role that they had in educating prescribers or falsely educating prescribers.
Yeah.
I mentioned that here in the chat, we've shared some information on some safe opioid prescribing, continuing medical education that's available. So just want to tell our attendees, we still have close to 500 attendees on with us. So want to make sure that everybody knows and sees that information. For those of you in New Jersey, if you're in Ocean County, the Ocean County prosecutor is providing a scholarship for you to take that education. Just want to throw that out there, but there's also additional information in the chat. So talking a little bit about this crisis that we're in and the opiate epidemic and the opiate epidemic, right? Within this pandemic, the COVID pandemic. And so you've talked a little bit about isolation. Can you add to that? Can you see a way out?
Well, a way out. Part of this, yes, I think that, I guess what I was seeing as I was writing the last of this book, in the last half year of the last half of or the first half, I'm sorry, of 2021, and so about almost a year ago now, and I began to see this. It may sound strange to talk about all I've talked about and have a book that's the subtitle to which is America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth, but that's because I'm very hopeful about this, I have to say, because we are in the middle of two problems, maybe even three to talk about, but certainly two problems that are calling on us showing us that the way we have approached life is unhealthy and unnatural, and we need to understand. And with the pandemic showed us how much we need other people. Again, I believe we've spent 40 years in this country just destroying all the ways in which we used to get together and be a community. Number one, I would say the opioid epidemic was already doing that. And it's also showing us, gee, we all have the ability, again, as I said, to be that addict eating from the trash. We all can be the most vulnerable. I would also bring in Black Lives Matter, I have to say, in all this. I am not at all a fan of the idea of defunding police, but there is clearly an issue here. Black Lives Matter these are all connected, So the opioid epidemic is the agony that we create in trying to have a pain-free life. Through isolation and all that kind of stuff. The pandemic is about how much we need each other, and when in isolation we are miserable and depressed and so on. And Black Lives Matter is about how we really can't move forward without addressing pain too long ignored. Right. And so the ideas of community apply to everybody. Now, when I was writing Dreamland, I have to say, I did not talk to one Black person. I mean, it was really almost entirely a white phenomenon. But the idea behind strengthening community, we all need to understand is absolutely something that we need to pay attention to in the Black community and understand how that community has been at times ravaged, at times hindered, at times suffocated. And all of that is part of the mix too. All of these things are all getting to the idea that how we have been living is not okay. It's not healthy for us individually. It's not healthy for the country. It's certainly not. It's not healthy for neighborhoods or regions or what have you. Right? It's to say that we know though how to move forward is because we have survived as a species. Again, as I was saying, well, the most potent thing that we have going for in our favor is this need for community. We just need to broaden that idea to include more folks and understand that when we try to hide in our houses or behind our screens, it's not healthy. It's damaging. The caveman who walked out of the cave marching to the beat of his own drummer and went off, and he was eaten. We come from an experience that says that the most important thing we can be is together. In the last 40 years in this country, we've just decided, no, that's not necessary. And we've ignored other people who say, hey, we're not part of this mix, haven't been part of this mix, right? So I don't know, I get off on some of this stuff, but rambling a little bit, but I do believe that these are all connected. They all have their Venn diagram, and they all have their little part they're all kind of part of the same story, really.
No, I think this conversation is so important for all of us here, especially the hope that you say you continue to have, and the the positive contributions that anyone can make. And I know there's a lot of efforts on that. I'm coming to the end of our questions, so obviously one of the questions is it wishful thinking to think that we'll be able to come up with solutions to this epidemic?
No, no, I don't believe that there's a solution. There's many solutions, and many of them are local, right? We live in a world where we are surrounded. First of all, you got all this story about the fentanyl and meth coming out of Mexico, and it is just sinister. It is a devastating story. But at the same time, one of the things I did in this book was to try to connect that, though, to the world that we live in of legally addictive junk, right? Fast food, sugar, chicken nugget. I mean, chicken nuggets, they might as well be crack. It's like 60% fat and salt. My God. Yeah, dip, and that's sugar, and it's like this. Anyway, gambling, pornography, video games, my God, social media apps. You could go on and on about this. We have this enormous long continuum of highly addictive junk. Some of it's Twitter and all that kind of, but also cable TV news. We don't have cable TV in our house because can't stand that the CNN or Fox News. It's just all babble, alarmist babble, right? So there's this enormous continuum, and you start with Facebook engineers and casino designers, and and Fox and CNN and all that, and all at the end is the Sinaloa drug cartel. All of which are in one way or another trying to monkey with our brain chemistry to get us to impulsively use, buy, whatever their thing. And that's why what we eat, what we consume, news, etc., matters enormously. That's why it's so important to be at the local level, finding your solutions at the local level, the smallest level possible, because there you are beginning to make the strong connections, the strong, small, minute movements forward that I think will strengthen community in ways that actually matter, right? I think the federal government's job is to shepherd that along, encourage that, but it really is at the local level. And I mean, at the very local level where the true solutions come for that little community. And that is what is our defense against this onslaught, bombardment of, almost pornographic ads of burgers just gushing with fat and glistening and all that. And then fentanyl and meth from the Sinaloa groups and the other cartels down there in Mexico, et cetera. It's all that stuff. It's turning to our neighbors, to ourselves, and finding our community at the local level and strengthening that bulwark. That is really enormously important. We just ignored it for so long.
Now, again, and not to, because I know we have a lot of people on from across the country, but I can speak for in New Jersey. We actually have a very unique program, a municipal alliance program for the prevention of drug and alcohol use. And they are community-based local volunteers who come together, even in small municipalities, small communities, and say, what are the problems that we're facing here in our community, and how can we develop solutions to that. So anyone who is on it, I encourage you, if you're from New Jersey, connect with your local municipal alliance, connect with the Governor's Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse who oversees them. If you are from out of state, definitely we can help make a connection between you and our Governor's Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse who oversees the Municipal Alliance program for that community effort. I think we're gonna wrap up now. I just want to leave you with one last comment.
I think I'm not sure if I have one more comment in me. Frankly, I've said a lot.
Last thought you'd like everyone to leave with?
Just that this is not hopeless. The work many of you are doing, I'm going to assume, is essential to the country. It's also essential to your street and your school and your neighborhood and your house of worship, whatever that is. So I would say that is the thing that why I like doing these and why I like talking to people, is because I think that it's those folks they're already very locally focused anyway. And that's really important. If I would just finally say, I put in a link in there of where you could buy my book. You can get it almost anywhere. I also put in, by the way, my email. So if you need to be in touch, feel free to just check out the chat thing there. And there's my emails in there as well.
All right, great. Well, I want to thank you so much, Sam, for spending this hour and a half with us.
My pleasure. I always love it. Thank you, Angela. It's really great of you.
No, and all that you've done to help share your message of hope, but also of history and connection here in our state and across the country with all of our attendees. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of our attendees who stayed on with us for all of this time. We've included a lot of information here in the chat for you to review, including Sam's email address, a link to his new book, The Least Among Us. And we have put, we're going to continue to monitor the chat for a few more minutes, but you have our contact information if you are not able to get a question answered, or you want a connection to someone, please feel free to reach out. A copy of this presentation will be available on the websites for the Opiate Education Foundation of America, as well as knockoutday.drugfreenj.org. I wish all of you a wonderful February as we move forward, a wonderful year. I thank you again, Sam, and I wish everyone good health. Be well.
Bye-bye. Thanks, guys.